In the Isleweaver update, Oraxia absolutely surprised me, make no mistake. But can I tell you what surprised me the most? Yeah, Oraxia's signature weapons. Who would have thought? And honestly, I could not be happier about it. I can confidently say now we have a new best whip in Warframe. The Spinnerex. Yes, you heard me correctly. Generally speaking, whips aren't the best melees in Warframe. However, the Spinnerex has come in and taken the throne because of its very unique trait. Her secondaries, the Scyotid, are also fantastic. They don't do the most amount of damage, but they are very good for utility options. I will also be showing a disgusting synergy that I'm sure you will absolutely love. So stay tuned for that. Keep watching. Trust me, you will not regret it. Let's start off with the Spinnerex. The Spinnerex is a whip. Like I said, whips generally are not the best melees, but this one is a little special because of its unique trait. On death, enemies have a 10% chance to burst for each stack of toxin status effect applied to them, spreading toxin damage on the explosion. It will spread 1 toxin proc per explosion, sadly, but it still deals a lot of damage, and it's kind of creates a chain reaction when there's a bunch of enemies in front of you. So it's actually not as bad as you think. I mean, sometimes you can get up to 10 plus toxin procs just from the explosions before you even touched an enemy that's like 20 meters away when using this melee. The toxin proc can be applied from the Spinnerex or external sources. It doesn't need to be just from the Spinnerex, which is absolutely insane and opens up a world of possibilities and synergies with this weapon. It is crazy. The main thing is, as long as the enemy has a toxin proc on them and you kill them or hit them with the Spinnerex, they will then explode, which will then proc the unique trait, which is amazing. The explosion radius is around 9 meters. I can't get the exact number, but it's around 8 to 9 meters, which is more than enough. I think it might be a little bit more, but I'll have to see. Let's talk about the base stats. 40% base status chance on these melees are not bad. It's obviously a status based melee. Let's be real, we all knew that. 16% critical chance and 2.4 crit multiplier for the crit side of the weapon. Not the greatest, but it's still okay. Pure toxin damage, that is literally the only thing this weapon does, is just pure toxin, which is great, and it makes sense because of the unique trait. You can go full in on the status chance for this weapon and use crit for like external sources, for example like Wrathful Advance or anything like that, but overall you kind of want a balanced setup going over both things, because with Weeping Wounds you will scale more than enough status chance with the Spinnerex. I do find it weird that Oraxia's signature weapon is a melee, but she can't use her melee in her fourth, but I understand why that is the case, because obviously Mercy Kiss takes over, but it's just a bit sad, I guess. However, I will not complain because the Spinnerex is amazing, and I'm so happy that a whip in Warframe is finally decent. Because the Spinnerex has base toxin, melee afflictions is absolutely perfect. There is a melee influence build for later on, and I'll explain how that kind of works. It's a little bit more intricate and requires a bit more of a setup, but melee afflictions is by far the best because of the Coiling Viper stance. The Coiling Viper stance is the best stance for afflictions because your neutral attack lifts enemies on the second hit, as well as your forward attack lifts them on the second, and your block attack lifts them on the second. Heavy attacks apply afflictions, which means Tenekai is amazing. Burning Wasp, the other stance, does not work, so unfortunately you are stuck to using Coiling Viper. When it comes to the main build, when you just kind of want to use it with any Warframe, I would recommend just going a flat toxin build with afflictions. Running Reach with this weapon is very good because it increases your range for obvious reasons. I will say Weeping Wounds is a must-have. It's perfect. It allows you to scale a lot more toxin procs, and it also allows afflictions to proc easier, so it is just a very good idea to use it. When it comes to the base damage scaling, I did go for Condition Overload, but you can also switch it out for a just base pressure point or prime pressure point, depending if you are using a primer companion. I generally always run a primer companion. I use the Doriga with the Tazi core or a burst prime laser, and that's my primer, which means my melees will scale perfectly off of Condition Overload. But if you don't want to run that, by all means just run normal pressure point or primed pressure point. Magnetic Rush is a flexible mod slot. You could switch that out for a Bane, you could switch that out for anything else, Gladiator Might, you name it. This is what the full build looks like. The thing is with Magnetic Rush though, is it kind of creates a perfect all-rounder for enemies with Overguard as well as Corpus enemies and so on. So you're scaling Magnetic as well as Corpus, and you have afflictions. You get the idea. It's just a nice all-rounder. The nice thing about this setup right here is it can be used on any Warframe, melee frame or not melee frame. It's just a fun fun build to use. Then we move on to a blast toxin setup, which is incredibly powerful when paired with the right frame or with the right companion. I actually made a short about this the other day. Pairing blast with melee afflictions is absolutely insane because your melee will proc just a few blast procs and melee afflictions will kick in, just instantly pushing it to 10, which will then pop enemies. It is amazing how good it is. One of the main frames that I could suggest for this is actually using Nova because of her null star, or simply any frame, and you could just stick to the companion that primes with blast procs because you have afflictions like I just explained. But yes, Nova with null star and melee afflictions as well as the primer is just so satisfying. You get huge explosions from both blast and toxin, and it's just a lot of fun to play. Definitely worth giving it a try. Then we sadly have a melee influence setup. I know we are all tired of it, me too. Viral electricity, however, can only be used on Saren, or you can proc toxin via external sources. The star for this, when it comes to proccing it via external sources, has to be Citrine with her new augment, Prismatic Companion. This augment makes your pet a walking turret, giving you huge status chance bonuses, and you can also proc a bunch of toxin status effects. On top of that, you can use Recrystallize to spread red crits, put it on any beast companion, and just delete everything. It is one of the craziest synergies I have seen, but that's not all. There is still crazier. One other frame that I would suggest that I gave a try, which I don't think you would have expected, but Lavos with Valence Formation is very good when paired with the Spinnerex because of course you can choose the element that you want to run, and it also guarantees that status effect on hit when you proc Valence Formation, so it is just perfect. Alternatively, if you don't want to do specific frames, you just kind of want to use a melee influence setup, I would recommend using a companion with a toxin primer. It's your choice what you decide to use here, but that's kind of the route that you would go if you were going to use melee influence. Oraxia herself is actually a good option if you subsume something like Raw on your 4th. It's not ideal because let's be real, we all want the spider legs, but it does work very well, and you can still use Mercy's Kiss to move around quickly by leaping onto enemies. I would highly recommend running Toxin Shards on certain frames if you want to min-max this melee, or maybe even just the purple shards that give you extra crit damage over 500 energy. And of course, I cannot not show a budget build for those of you who just want to give it a light try and see if it is worth it before investing a bunch of Formo. And finally, we move on to the craziest synergy I have seen so far, a Volt influence setup. Here you mod for flat toxin, you put Raw on Volt's 4th or 3rd ability, depends what you want, use Shock Trooper to gain electricity for your melee so that you can actually proc influence, and here we probably have the fastest whip nuke melee setup I have ever seen. It is great to be in Warframe 2025. Whoops generally scale very well with attack speed, and Volt's speed boost makes it perfect. Like, it is perfect for this. Everything explodes and just spreads out. It is oddly satisfying to watch. I cannot recommend it enough to give it a go. It does require quite a bit of investment for, across the board for Volt and also for the Spinnerex, but it is so worth it, and you can also just make a budget version if you don't want to go all in. Other frames I would suggest is Varuna, Kalervo, Kome, and 100% Mirage with her mirrors, or any frame that you want. But Mirage with her mirrors is pretty cool with this. The main thing that I can say with the Spinnerex is having at least 10 toxin procs on enemies so they explode 100% of the time. One other thing I could say is using Raw in general with this melee is perfect because you're going to be boosting those dots. It's just, yeah, it is a lot of fun. I'm so glad that the Spinnerex is strong, and I'm just very happy with that, and I think there's going to be so many more synergies as time goes on. But before we move on, better hit that like button or I'm gonna whip you. Moving on to the Scyotids, I'm pretty sure that's how you say it. They are pretty much like throwing knives in a sense, but you throw toxin laced barbs instead. It has good magazine capacity, about 40 in a magazine, which is very nice. So it's not like your 8 or 10 ammo magazine throwing knives. It's a lot more, but what makes them so special is the unique trait, which states alternate fire lobs a webbed snare that damages, paralyzes, and groups up to 8 enemies within a 10-meter radius. The number of enemies afflicted will be multiplied by multi-shot. The alt fire does use 4 ammo per pop. You can see the huge utility potential from this alt fire alone. It is super fun for blast and gas. You want to stack as much multi-shot as you can so you pull as many enemies in as possible because of the unique trait, obviously. Enemies will be stunned for around 8 seconds. The Scyotid can be used on any frame for the sole purpose of pulling enemies in while also providing a little bit of priming. I say a little bit because it is very little. I actually wouldn't even consider it to be a primer, but it can be used as one. It's very useful for frames who kind of need enemies to be pulled in for their abilities and so on or anything like that. Instead of using the Nautilus or subsuming a pull mechanic or using the Operator Arcane, you now have a very fast pull mechanic from your secondary as a utility option. It's very good. Let's talk about the stats. It's got good multi-shot scaling. Please don't use Acuity for this because for obvious reasons. It's got okay status chance and decent crit chance. 1.6 meters of punch through at base. Stats are not the craziest to be fair, but with the right build you can make it work. In terms of damage, ironically gas is pretty good. Usually you don't want gas with this type of weapon because gas is mainly used in weapons that kind of hit less but hit harder. However, this weapon has so much multi-shot that when you pull enemies in, you can get like 10 gas procs very easily. But because it pulls them in, gas actually works very well. This is what the gas build looks like here. You can actually switch out Innovate for Merciless and take away Hornet Strike and go for more crit if you'd like. I did find Innovate to be pretty decent, but Merciless is also very good as you get that extra reload speed, so it's very nice. But by all means, play around with the elements that you like. I just found gas as an AoE is just perfect for this weapon. I would recommend running Lethal Momentum as the travel time of these projectiles is pretty slow. It's quite important to run it, but it does require a lot of former for this weapon. This is the main damage build for the Scyotid. I have tried others, but personally, gas is definitely the best. There is a Blast Toxin build if you'd like to try that too. But again, I've tried Viral Heat, I've tried Corrosive Heat, I've tried all of those, and I just found that, you know, gas is kind of the best for the grouping. But also Corrosive Heat and Cascadia Flare is pretty good when it comes to single target and so on, if you'd like to use this weapon for that. Now, I have made a utility build, but if I'm being honest, you don't actually need to make a separate utility build, but I'm going to show it anyway for those of you who would like to do that. We actually only need a couple of mods like multi-shot and fire rate. And then we just stack random mods that kind of help us. And I actually went for Fortifier. The Alt Fire doesn't actually proc Fortifier and unfortunately doesn't do enough damage against them. The only time it does do damage against the overguarded enemies is if the snare actually hits the enemy instead of going on the ground. So that is when Fortifier will proc from the Alt Fire. However, the main fire can help you for that as well. But again, I think the main build is fine for both utility and a bit of damage if you want to get both out of it. Here is a budget build for those who'd like to try it out. And I can say one thing though, the problem with this weapon is you need a bit of fire rate if you want to make it feel a little bit better. So you can actually make use of the Warframe Arcane Velocity, and then you can get that extra fire rate if you'd like. Overall, the Spinnerex is definitely a lot better, but the Scyotids are definitely not bad by any means, and they're just unique and are a lot of fun to play. For my final thoughts on her weapons, they both are pretty damn good. I am super excited that the Spinnerex has so many crazy synergies, and I am very excited to try out more frames and more synergies with it. I just kind of jumped to the synergies that I thought would work, and they worked out pretty damn well. Let me know in the comments below if you guys have found any crazy synergies, especially with the Scyotid. I'm very interested to find out if you guys have found anything like that. I would also recommend that you go and watch MH Blackie's Valkyr video, as he's going to release that today, and then you can see his opinion and what he thinks about the Valkyr rework. My Valkyr video will be coming out semi-soon. And as always, a huge thank you to our amazing channel members. You guys are amazing. Thank you for your support. And that will be all. Enjoy her weapons. Bye.